Adolfo Carrión, the first director of the White House Office of Urban Affairs, Deputy Assistant to the President. In that capacity, Director Carrión is charged with coordinating the policies of presidential cabinet agencies into an effective agenda for urban America. Urban America. If you grew up, as I did, in urban America, and if you, as I did, attended public schools in urban America, then you know that when it comes to something as important as choosing a White House Director of Urban Affairs, you want someone who's taken more than a sociological field trip to the hood. You want someone who understands the unique challenges of urban living, of urban education, of urban housing, because he himself has lived it. And urban America has found that champion in Adolfo Carrión. A product himself of New York public schools, Adolfo began his career as a public school teacher in the Bronx, and he went on to pursue a degree in urban planning from Hunter College. He then worked for the New York City Department of City Planning, served as district manager of community planning in the Bronx, and was elected to the New York City Council, where he served one term before being elected president of the Borough Bronx, a post he held for 7 years, prior to assuming his current position. As borough president, Adolfo shepherded a period of robust growth and development in the Bronx, including orchestrating the deal that led to the building of the new Yankees Stadium. In his tenure as the head of the National Association of Latino Elected Officials, NALEO, Carrión pushed for increased Latino voter participation and played a critical role in persuading more Latinos to run for office. At NDN, we're proud to call him an old friend, proud to say we knew him when. And it is my honor to introduce to you one of urban America's greatest champions, Adolfo Carrión.
Thank you. Thank you, Alicia. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be here. And thank you for taking the time to come and spend a few minutes with me and with our friends here at NDN. I want to begin by thanking Alicia. I know that she has just begun her journey here at NDN, and if anybody knows anything about what's going to happen here, it's going to be a roller coaster ride. It's a fun and robust organization that is interested in the future prospects of this country, and especially has given great attention to the prospects of the Latino community. So thank you, Alicia. I also want to say thank you to my friend Simon Rosenberg, who lured me in to do something in 2004 that was lots of fun with some of our friends, including then Congress member Bob Menendez and some other folks who made some statements in a certain political campaign back then about the urgency of that moment and of setting the nation's priorities. And I also want to say thank you to Andres Ramirez for getting after everyone to be here, and whether you're here in person or you're here by online connection. And thank you all for taking the moment to come and join us today. First, I want to start with a bit of history, because we can't know where we're going or how to get there if we don't know where we began or where we're coming from. One of our greatest American educators once said of history, if you drew a line through all of the valleys and all of the peaks, that line would be drawn with an upward curve. The American story is a story of peaks and valleys, and that upward curve, progress, didn't happen by accident. It happened through the dedication, courage, and conviction of those that came before us. Those like Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta, who championed fair pay and labor rights in the face of discrimination. Those like Sylvia Mendez, who before we ever even heard of Brown versus Board of Education, helped to pave the way for school integration. People like my friends from New York, Cesar Perales and Antonia Pantoja, who helped establish bilingual education in schools across our country. And giants like Raul Izaguirre, whose leadership of the National Council of La Raza has helped so many Latinos reach higher and grab their portion of the American dream. And as I look around this room, I see the product of the work of those giants and those champions for our community. Of course, there are many other trailblazing Latinos, countless others that are in la lucha for equal rights and equal opportunity. And there are those ordinary people who do extraordinary things every single day, like working 2 jobs to send their son or daughter to college, like those who don't back down in the face of modern-day discrimination, those who shatter glass ceilings and add their names to the ranks of America's firsts, like our first Latina Supreme Court Justice, Sonia Sotomayor. But even as we consider these high points, these peaks in our history, we have to confront a sobering reality, a reality that is often marred by cruelty, stereotypes, unfair treatment, and a constant struggle to maintain that upward curve of progress. The work of these pioneers, my friends, is not done. This generation of Americans has its work cut out for it. These challenges are not unique to us as a Latino community. They are, in fact, a challenge for all Americans. Consider the situation that President Obama faced when he took office just a little over a year ago. Our country was mired in 2 wars and facing a deficit of trust around the world. A broken healthcare system and an education system that was broken, an outdated energy policy that pointed us to the past instead of the future, a $1.3 trillion national debt, a financial crisis that became a full-blown economic crisis. A year ago, we were losing an average of 700,000 jobs a month. It's stunning when you think of that number of people falling out of the workplace. The credit markets had dried up. Our banking system was on the verge of collapse, and $5 trillion of American household wealth was simply evaporating. An unsustainable set of circumstances. And you'll hear the president use that phrase, unsustainable. An unsustainable set of circumstances was the welcome mat that welcomed the president to Washington. But he didn't seek the presidency, my friends, because he knew it would be easy. He knew it would be difficult. And he was anxious to work with you and I to move this country forward. And so he acted quickly. He took action to save our banking system, to get credit flowing again, and help keep millions of Americans in their homes. In the first 30 days of his administration, we drafted a Recovery Act to put people back to work across America. We cut taxes for 95% of working families, extended and increased unemployment insurance for 12 million Americans, and cut the cost of COBRA so people who lost their jobs didn't lose their health care coverage. We invested about $20 billion more in the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, formerly known as the Food Stamp Program, so that families could put more food on the table. And the Recovery Act, in fact, saved the jobs of state and local workers like teachers and police officers, and put Americans to work with the largest investment in our infrastructure since we built the interstate highway system in the 1950s. We have pulled ourselves back from the brink of what many were calling the next Great Depression. And I believe, as most economists and most analysts believe, that we're moving in the right direction. We are seeing the results. The Recovery Act has kept about 2 million people in their jobs that would otherwise have been unemployed. And it's one of the main reasons the economy has gone from shrinking by 6% to growing by about 6%. The Recovery Act was the right thing to do for Latinos and for all Americans. But it was only the beginning. While we have responded to the short-term crisis, we're focusing now on the long term. How to rebuild the foundation of our economy so that we can be more prosperous and more successful in the future. And the key to achieving that goal lies within our nation's education system. One that, unfortunately, more than half a century after Sylvia Menendez, continues to deny the dream of a world-class education to many Latino children in America today. Latino children score 26 points lower in reading than other groups, 21 points lower in math. Latinos are dropping out of school more than just about any other group of their peers. They are part of that 1.2 million youngsters who've been allowed to drop out of school every year, costing our country nearly $320 billion in lost earning potential, let alone the social impacts and the drag to our productivity as a nation. Many are in overcrowded schools and crumbling schools filled with poor children and concentrated poverty. Not just Latino children, but black children and brown and white, urban and rural children. To address this, the President and his Education Secretary, Arne Duncan, have initiated some of the most far-reaching education reforms ever undertaken. Reforms that expect excellence in K through 12 education across racial barriers, demanding greater accountability from our education system. Reforms that encourage a race to the top through state-developed common standards for success. Reforms that make college more accessible and affordable for all Americans and that build up our community colleges like the $10.6 billion American Graduation Initiative. Reforms that include a new blueprint for overhauling No Child Left Behind, which just yesterday the President sent to Congress. This plan recognizes that while the federal government can play a leading role in encouraging reforms and the high standards we need, the impetus for that change will come from states and from local schools and local school districts. So we set high standards, but give educators the flexibility to meet them. Under these new guidelines, we reward schools that achieve excellence or show real progress and encourage local districts to change schools that are clearly letting their students down. We will better prepare teachers, support teachers, and encourage teachers to stay in the field, finally treating them like the professionals they are. Through this plan, we are setting an ambitious goal. All students should graduate from high school prepared for college and a career, no matter who you are or where you come from. Latino children now constitute almost 1/4 of the child population in the United States under the age of 5, making them the fastest growing subgroup. What we do now to reform our education system will help shape the path these children take in their schooling and in their professional careers later in life. What we do now will at the same time shape our future workforce, one that must be skilled, educated, and prepared to meet the growing demands of a global economy. The prosperity of our community and our country as a whole depends on it. Education is not the only challenge this administration is facing. It's not the only challenge we are confronting in our efforts to rebuild the foundation of our American economy. There is no issue more basic, more central to American prosperity and the prosperity of American families than homeownership and housing. And yet, too many Latinos have faced foreclosure. Too many have not had the chance to thrive because of crime and unsafe circumstances in neighborhoods. Too many live too far from quality schools or health centers or the other necessities that make for a sustainable and rich existence. For too many families, neighborhoods are not a place to call home, but rather, and sadly, a place to fear. You probably know of neighborhoods like this. I certainly do. I also know that change does not come from the top, but comes from local communities, from the bottom. And the president understands this. Local leaders know best how to solve their community's problems because they live there and they live the struggles of those local communities every day. The president understands that it's our job as the federal government to support these leaders and their efforts to change their neighborhoods for the better, to provide them with the resources to thrive. And in order to do that, we cannot just simply allocate money to one area or one sector. Life doesn't happen in those silos that government operates in traditionally. Every investment in transportation needs to be coordinated with affordable housing dollars and education dollars and health and small business investments and workforce development. This is the only way to fundamentally change the pattern of urban development where the lion's share of Latinos are and where the lion's share of the American people live. This is the only true reflection of how people live their lives day to day. They live them not in categories, not in silos, but in this integrated fashion. And our intent as an administration is to integrate the efforts of the federal agencies into investing in neighborhoods and communities. President Obama understands this, as does his urban affairs team, which I'm a proud member of. That's why the fiscal year 2011 budget makes strategic and large investments in community health centers, healthy food financing to deal with food deserts, neighborhood revitalization efforts, infrastructure development, small business development, and sustainable and livable communities initiatives. And let me just stray from my prepared remarks for just a second to share with you that the president asked us in July of last year to go out and do what we coined the national conversation on the future of cities and metros. And he said as a candidate, he said it during the transition to the team that was helping to prepare the basic constructs of this administration, and early on as we were launching our efforts and the first budget, that he believes that innovation and creativity and the energy and the prospects for the future of our country are in local communities. And that's where we need to go find them. And that in fact, we should be a supporting actor to the lead actor in this play, which is local communities that are solving problems every day. People opening up businesses, finding new solutions to healthcare delivery, to environmental challenges, to education, to ensuring that the workforce is prepared, creating new jobs in small businesses where the lion's share of the jobs are created, coming up with new inventions. He essentially said, urban team, go find those initiatives, those innovations, bring them back, and let's begin to retool the programs and retool our investment strategy, how we build cities that are smarter and more productive, more competitive, more environmentally responsible, and neighborhoods that are opportunity rich. So we went to places like Philadelphia and Kansas City and Los Angeles and so many other cities. But in particular, Philadelphia stands out in my mind because this community of Philadelphia, in North Philadelphia, was essentially a food desert that had been isolated. All of the negative indicators were present there. There was joblessness, there were poor health conditions, there were low educational attainment levels, there were housing difficulties, there were a lack of services, overall disconnect from the rest of Philadelphia. Happened to be mostly African-American community. And they got together as a community and said, we need to solve this problem. We need to address the fact that we're isolated. And they started with addressing access to fresh, healthy foods. And they together invited the development of a 75,000 square foot supermarket. The supermarket developer agreed to hire local people to buy produce from the farms in central and western Pennsylvania to create that organic relationship between urban and rural, to connect the church community, the education community. They had an urban farm. The kids were growing vegetables, selling them in the supermarket, and beginning to tie the efforts. So it went from food to nutrition to education to jobs to positioning that community to be much more competitive. That's the kind of innovation that, in the absence of years of having a responsible and comprehensive urban policy that grows robust urban economies that would ultimately benefit the entirety of our nation, in the absence of that, communities across the country were pasting together these solutions. It ought to be that the federal government, in its organization and in its offering of grants and opportunities, support those efforts and make those efforts much more easy than they have historically been. And let me go to the question of resources. How do we determine who gets what? What areas need the most attention? Well, the answer is arriving in our mailboxes in today, tomorrow, over the next few days. Every 10 years, our Constitution requires the federal government to conduct a census, a count of the American population. Some may consider this a hassle, some may consider it a pointless exercise in bureaucracy, and some may fear that it's a way of the government being too intrusive, but those people are wrong. The census is fundamental to our democracy. It determines representation in Congress. It determines how federal funds are spent on things like schools and roads and where businesses decide to put new stores and new factories and new job opportunities for communities. Latinos today are the largest minority in the United States, at nearly 50 million people. Latinos are projected to account for 60% of the nation's population growth between 2005 and 2050. And we know that that population is expected to be, the Latinos are expected to be, a quarter of the nation's population at that juncture. Projections are, just to think of the magnitude of that number, that by mid-century, we will add another 120 million people. That's 440 million people conservatively. This will require us to build about 200 billion square feet of homes, offices, businesses, and institutions. It will require us to equitably and fairly distribute resources across the nation. So what's at stake here is the future of the quality of every American community and the ability to have every American community fairly represented in the nation's decisions. The most important thing to do right now, then, is to ensure that everyone fill out their census forms, that they stand up and be counted. This is a top priority for the Obama administration, and with over 21,000 partners, we are raising awareness in 28 languages about the importance of the census. We're investing more money in Spanish media than ever before, and I'd like to recognize the leadership, role, and the work of all my friends at Univision, Telemundo, LULAC, NALEO, National Council of La Raza, the Congressional Hispanic Institute, Voto Latino, MALDEF, all our friends. They're helping us get the word out. They're helping us to evaluate the needs that exist in our community. They're helping us, in essence, to accurately reflect the changing face of our nation. And if we don't fill out the forms, if we don't respond, if we are not counted, then in the nation's eyes, we don't count. The Obama administration is a proud partner with the Latino community. And by working together, I know that we can successfully meet the challenges we face as a people, as a nation. And we can make sure that the line of progress that runs through the peaks and the valleys of our history will remain on an upward trajectory. Thank you all very much for this opportunity. Thank you.